Hi, I was a registered medical practitioner in Perth, Western Australia for 53 years, and there hadn't been a medical school in Western Australia, so there was a shortage of doctors. I had to go to the Adelaide Medical School, so we did everything. I worked in the hospitals for 2 years and then as a family doctor in the suburbs for many years, doing hospital and home visits, surgery consultations in my office, helped to bring 800 babies into the world, and did lots of tonsillectomies, appendicectomies, vasectomies, broken bones, cuts, and all sorts of things. And I came to the conclusion that the most important thing for people to have a good life was their mental health. And I became very interested in mental health because there was a big problem. The big problem was that it seemed like there were never going to be enough mental health care workers to give the help that all the people with mental health problems needed. Many people with mental health problems got no help, and nobody seemed to get enough help. There were problems with mental health. There were only two tools, and they both had big weaknesses. Nearly everything we do today, we do with tools. Good tools, effective tools that people can use and are affordable are necessary in every field and didn't exist in mental health. The two tools were medicines and talk therapy. Medicines had a big weakness. People who needed to take medicines want medicines to be non-addictive, to work quickly, to make them better and to be able to stop. But the people who make medicines wanted everybody to stay on as many medicines as possible for as long as possible, and if possible never get well enough to be able to stop those medicines, and the medicines were slow. What they did was they made as many medicines as possible addictive. The commonest mental health problem was worry, anxiety, and all of the medicines for worry, anxiety were addictive. Another common problem was sleep disorders, problems with sleep, and all the medicines for sleep were addictive. Originally, there were barbiturates. There were many barbiturates, but they were all addictive. And then in the 1960s, a new type of calming or sleep medicine became available. Valium, Seropax, Mogadon, Xanax, and they were all addictive. And the three main medicines for ADD were all addictive. That is, Ritalin, dexamphetamine, and Adderall were all addictive. So the treatments for ADD could only be prescribed by specialists, by pediatricians, and by psychiatrists. And that created big problems because family doctors were not allowed to prescribe those addictive ADD medicines, so they didn't learn about addiction. They didn't learn about ADD. You learn about treatments in medical school, but where you really learn about it is treating people. And if you couldn't prescribe the medicines for ADD, you didn't learn about ADD. And this created a great problem. And medicines were also slow. When you swallow a tablet or a capsule, it takes half an hour to go right down your gut and start to be absorbed and start to give you relief, and 1 to 2 hours before you get good relief. So half an hour to an hour to start to get relief is just too slow for many mental health and addiction situations. The other tool for mental health and addiction was talk therapy, and talk therapy had 2 big problems. Talk therapy, that is counselling, psychotherapy, CBT, got various names, but basically it's talking to the patient. And its first problem is it's very slow. You need an hour with a new patient with mental health disorders or addiction or both, to go through their whole history, to make a diagnosis, to find what caused the problem and what makes the problem worse and how to fix the problem. And then you need to see them for half an hour to an hour every week for quite a long time, just so slow. And talk therapy was also costly, too costly for a lot of people. To be a therapist, you had to have at least a 4-year psych degree from a university, and a lot of psychologists had a 7-year PhD, and all psychiatrists had to have a 6-year general medical degree from a university, and then a couple of years of general medical practice, and then 3, 4 or 5 years of postgraduate study in psychiatry to become a psychiatrist. So all therapists were very intelligent people who'd had long university training, and they had to be well paid. They deserved to be well paid, and if we didn't pay them well, we were going to be even shorter of them. So what was the solution to this? I gradually came to the conclusion that there had to be 3 changes. First of all, we had to have more tools. We had to have a complete package of tools that effectively treated mental health disorders. Secondly, those tools had to be self-help tools. People had to be able to use those tools to help themselves, because if there was never going to be enough mental health professionals to help everybody who needed help, then people had to help themselves. And helping yourself with good tools is a very good thing to do. And thirdly, the tools had to enable people to start to treat problems as soon as they start. When a problem first starts, it's much simpler, and diagnosing and fixing it and understanding the causes is much simpler. But because of the shortage of mental health professionals, and because there was a stigma associated with mental health, people didn't ask for help when problems first started, or usually didn't. They often waited for years and years, and one problem led to another problem. You started with ADD, ADHD, you then got a poor education, you then became a problem child and had poor performance and mental distress, and ended up with poor employment, money problems, etc., etc. So it was essential that the tools should be able to be started to be used early, and that the general concept of waiting till you crash before you seek help should be changed to that as soon as you get a problem, you start to get help. So over the years, over a 27-year period, I developed a package of 7 tools. The tools were videos, websites, an app, live streaming, powder medicines, pocket powder medicine dispensers, and heartbeat meditation aids. Videos are the fastest, easiest, best, lowest cost way to understand mental health problems. I started many years ago with a 10-minute video that people could watch, which enabled me to deal with them much more quickly, saved me a lot of time, because I was swamped with so many people requiring mental health and addiction care, because there was not enough professionals. I wasn't a psychologist, I wasn't a psychiatrist, I was just a family doctor, but I saw people every day who needed mental health care. And in the late 1990s we had a terrible epidemic of heroin addiction, and people were dying everywhere from heroin overdoses. And I thought I should learn about heroin, so I started to work 10 hours a week in an addiction clinic, which was 99% heroin. And that opened my eyes to other problems. The problem was that there were two kinds of clinics. There were mental health clinics and there were addiction clinics. And what I found, or I wanted to know what caused addiction problems, and I went to all the addiction clinics in Perth and Sydney and couldn't find a single worker who could tell me what caused addiction. And they would say things like, oh, they're just dickheads chasing highs. But they looked sick to me, and I wanted to find the cause. I felt that I couldn't really help people to get better quickly, or to avoid relapsing, unless I knew the cause and dealt with the cause. And one day in the clinic where I was working 10 hours a week, I saw 15 heroin addicts and realized that 5 of them had ADD, ADHD, none of them being treated and mostly not diagnosed. And at that time there was a general misconception that mental health, that addiction problems caused mental health, but I found actually it's mental health problems that cause addiction. These 5 people who had ADD and had become heroin addicts had had ADD since they were children. It had created difficulties for them and they became problem children. When they went to school, they had great difficulty learning and they became problem children and copped a lot of flack and discipline, and were generally very unhappy. And they usually left school early with a very poor education and then had poor employment prospects. And when they were not diagnosed and treated properly, as most were, they often ended up seeking relief from street drugs. One of the 3 main things about characteristics of people with ADD, ADHD is that they are impulsive. They make snap decisions. They don't think about things and work out good solutions, and they were easy targets for people selling street drugs. So many of them became addicts. In one year I treated 700 heroin addicts, and a third of them, 230 approximately, had ADD, ADHD. and I couldn't prescribe treatment for them because I wasn't a pediatrician and I wasn't a psychiatrist. And in any case, no one, not even the psychiatrists, were allowed to prescribe ADD medicine for them because the authorities had made it illegal for addicts to be prescribed ADD medicines. So ADD, ADHD in its more severe forms is a really bad thing to have, but if you add heroin addiction, it's a disaster. And I wanted to help these people. But once I realized that a third of heroin addicts had ADD, ADHD, I went very carefully into the past history of every addict, what their childhood had been like, what their parents like, what their brothers and sisters were like, what their neighborhood was like, what their school was like. And I found that 19 out of 20 heroin addicts and other forms of addiction, alcoholism, crystal meth and so on, 19 out of 20, 95% of them had serious mental health distresses. If they had serious mental health disorder and distress and they didn't get correct diagnosis and treatment, then many of them resorted to getting relief from street drugs and inevitably became addicts, because addictive substances work like this. First of all, a small amount, which doesn't cost very much, gives great relief. But when you take an addictive substance, your chemistry develops a tolerance or a resistance to it, so the next time you have to take a bit more to get relief. And when you take more, you get more tolerance or resistance, and then you have to take even more. So with addictive substances, to get the relief from your mental health disorder, you have to take more and more and more until you're an addict, until the abnormal or the unnatural chemical had screwed up your chemistry so much that your chemistry couldn't function without the addictive substance. And then you were between the devil and the deep blue sea, because you still had your mental health disorder and its distresses, but you also had an addiction to an unnatural chemical that was costing you so much that you couldn't afford it. So and there was a problem, because there were two kinds of clinics. In the 1970s in Perth, they separated mental health care from addiction care. So there were two types of clinics. There were mental health clinics and there were addiction clinics. And the mental health clinics refused to see addicts. So once you were an addict, you couldn't get mental health care except from a private psychiatrist or psychologist, and addicts could almost never afford private psychologists or psychiatrists. Or if they had insurance, the insurance only covered a limited number of sessions each year, which wasn't enough to deal with their problems. So over a 27-year period, I developed a package of 7 tools to deal with mental health and addiction. The existing tools for mental health and addiction had great weaknesses. There was medicine. There were only 2 tools, medicines, and medicines, the people who needed to take medicines, wanted medicines that worked quickly, weren't addictive, weren't expensive, and that made them better so they could stop taking the medicines. But the pharmaceutical industry wanted people to take as many medicines as possible for as long as possible, and so they made the medicines, so many medicines, addictive. All the medicines for the commonest mental health problem, which was worry, anxiety, were addictive. All the medicines for sleep, which was a common mental health problem, were addictive. The three main medicines for ADD, ADHD were addictive. And the medicines were slow. When you swallow a tablet or a capsule, it takes half an hour to an hour to go right down your gut and start to be absorbed and start to give you relief, and 1 to 2 hours to give strong relief, and half an hour to an hour to start to give relief, and 1 to 2 hours to give strong relief is just too slow for most mental health conditions and addiction conditions. And the other treatment, the other tool for mental health and addiction was talk therapy, that is psychotherapy, counselling, CBT, whatever you like to call it, talk therapy. And talk therapy had two problems. One is it was very slow. With each new patient, you needed an hour to talk to them to discover what their mental health disorders was, to make a diagnosis, to work out what the cause was, what was aggravating it, making it worse, why they'd crashed, and how to help them get better. And then you'd need to see them for half an hour to an hour every week, preferably more than once a week, for quite a long time. And there was just not enough people, not enough healthcare professionals to do that. And that was very expensive, because to be a therapist, you either had to have a 4-year psych degree, and many people, many psychologists had a 7-year PhD, and to be a psychiatrist you had to do a 6-year general medicine degree, and then a couple of years of general medicine, and then 3, 4 or 5 years of postgraduate psychiatric training. So it took you 10 or 12 years. So therapists, whether they were psychologists or counselors or psychiatrists, were intelligent people who had to have a long training and needed to be paid well. They deserved to be paid well, and if we didn't pay them well, we'd have even less of them. So over a 27-year period, I developed 7 tools to deal with mental health and addiction, to overcome the shortage of mental health professionals. And those 3 tools, those 7 tools had to do 3 things. They first of all had to diagnose the problems and recommend the treatment quickly. Secondly, people with mental health problems had to do self-help. They had to be able to use those tools themselves, because they couldn't get enough help from mental health professionals. And thirdly, those tools had to enable people to start to treat their problems, their mental health problems or addiction problems, early, because early was much easier, not easy, but much less difficult than late. When people had mental health problems and then addictions for many years, they had their problems were so complicated that they needed so much work that very few of them, if any, were ever going to get all the help they needed. So the tools were videos, websites, a checklist, then a mental fix-it app, live streaming, powder medicines which start working in 5 minutes, and pocket powder medicine dispensers that enable people to carry their medicine wherever they are and take doses in seconds. And the seventh tool was a heartbeat meditation aid. So I made the first video many years ago, I think 12 or 15 years ago. It was about 10 minutes. It got 10,000 viewings in 9 months. A lot of people got a lot of help, and that saved me a lot of time. Instead of me having to spend half an hour or more with every patient explaining things to them, they could just watch the video, and they could watch the video as many times as they needed and in the convenience of their own home until they understood the problems. So that seemed to work so well that I made another 8 videos. But then gradually over the years people stopped watching 10-minute videos. So I thought, well, I've got to do them again. I've got to do them better, and I've got to do them more detailed. So I made 31 7 to 12 minute videos that covered everything very well. But people didn't watch them either. And then I realized that over the years, everybody, or 90% of people, had switched to only watching 1-minute videos. They just wanted to watch things that were very fast. So I started to make under a minute videos, TikTok-like videos. But each 1-minute video could only cover one subject, so I had to make lots of them. And I made 50 and then 70 and then 100. If you go to my website, you can see the list of videos. My first website, well, wasn't the first one, but the first on mental health and addiction was mentalhealthvideos.com, mentalhealthvideos.com, which was long and detailed and covered everything, but people found that too long. So eventually I had to make a short website, and so now I've got 2 websites. The long one, mentalhealthvideos.com, and a short one, smilefixit.com, which is a 1.5 page website, and on it you can just tap links to whatever you think you need to see in detail. Checklists, or I became swamped with addicts because they needed both mental health care and addiction care, and the mental health clinics refused to see addicts, so they couldn't get mental health care from the mental health clinics, and the addiction clinics just did nothing about mental health. When I had to sit in on an addiction clinic to learn how to treat them, what really I learned was how not to treat them, because they were just given addictive medicines for their addiction, and the causes were not found. Nobody was interested in the causes. Nobody was interested in mental health. And when I started my own clinic, I gave what was called dual diagnosis treatment, which is what every addict needed. They needed mental health diagnosis and treatment at the same time as they got their addiction treatment. And as the word spread, more and more addicts came. And another very important thing was that they mustn't have to wait to be seen. When they wanted to be seen, when they wanted to do something to get their problem solved, they needed to be seen the same day, because the next day they'd be back on their drugs. But the addiction clinic, the big health department addiction clinic, had an 8-week waiting list, which was hopeless. So I saw everybody who came every day. If they wanted an appointment, we gave them an appointment, but if they came without an appointment, we saw them. They might have to wait 2 or 3 hours, but addicts were good at waiting. They did a lot of waiting. And then when I got to see them, we found that 15 minutes when they wanted to be seen and treated was far more successful than half an hour or an hour when it suited us but didn't suit them. So I just couldn't cope. Couldn't give each addict all the time they needed, and we found that a checklist which one of my assistants would do with the patients before I saw them made everything much quicker. There was 20 questions in the checklist, and I could just read the checklist report and talk to the patient briefly and know what the problems were and what to do. But then but even checklists were slow, and as there became apps for everything, we realized we needed a mental health app. But making a mental health app was a lot of work and very costly. But we started 18 months ago, and a year ago we had the Mental Fix-It app. The Mental Fix-It app asks 38 questions about every aspect of mental health and addiction. And that sounds like it would take a long time, but actually for each question there were 3 possible answers, and you just had to tap your choice of those 3 answers. You didn't have to compose an answer, write an answer, just tap. So you could go to your phone, and if it was an iPhone, you find the App Store icon, and if it's an Android, you find the Google Play icon, and you just tap on the icon and you can download the free Mental Fix-It app in a few seconds. And then in 10 minutes you could tap all your answers, and as you tapped your choice of answers to the last question, an instant report came up on the screen which told you 4 things, the 4 things you needed to know. First of all, it told you which 6 of our 100 videos would help your particular problems most, because the app had recorded your problems that you tapped the highest score for. Each problem you tapped had a score. The most severe problems like childhood sexual abuse, post-traumatic stress disorder, severe bipolar, had a score of 15. The milder problems like moderate anxiety or moderate sleep disorder had a low score of 4. And the app could match the 6 videos that will help your biggest problems most. So the first part of the report was the best 6 videos for you to watch, which you could then watch in 6 minutes and watch over and over again until you understood it. The second thing in the instant report was which medicines were most likely to help you, because most people wanted to research the medicines online, consult Dr. Google before they went to their doctor and got a prescription. The third thing that the report gave was a complete list of everything that you had tapped as a problem. The biggest problems first, down to the smallest problems last. And that was very important, because if you're going to get completely better, you need to know all your problems. And one of the problems about the slowness of talk therapy was that you usually never got past the long time consuming main problems, or main problem and second problem. But most people had 3, 4, 5 or 6 problems, and they had smaller problems which were added to their difficulties but never got reached with talk therapy. But the instant report of the Mental Fix-It app covered all the problems in descending order. And also sometimes some people just couldn't cope with their biggest problem to start with, and so then we would explain to them, okay, leave the biggest problem for the time being and start with a smaller problem. And they could start with a smaller problem and deal with that smaller problem. And when they'd fix that smaller problem, they'd feel a bit better, they'd feel a bit stronger, they'd be a better problem solver, and then they could go on to another smaller problem. And when they had fixed all their smaller problems, they were quite a lot stronger, quite a lot happier, and better problem solvers, and could then deal with their big, terrible big problems. And the fourth thing that the instant report gave them was a graph that showed clearly their total scores, because each time they did the app check, which we recommend they do most days or every day to begin with, the app would add up the scores for all of their problems to create a total score, and then put that total score each time in a graph. And you, as soon as you looked at your report, you could see your graph of your total scores, which instantly told you whether you were getting better. If you were getting better, your total score graph was getting better. If you weren't getting better, the total score graph wasn't changing. If you were getting worse, the total score graph was getting worse. And to be able to instantly see what your total score graph was doing enabled you to know whether you were on the right treatment or not. If your total score graph was getting better, then you were on the right treatment. Carry on with that treatment. But if your total score graph wasn't getting better or was getting worse, you needed more treatment or different treatment. So you knew that straight away. You didn't spend weeks and weeks on the wrong treatment, not knowing it wasn't making you better. And also the instant graph helped you know what things happened to you or things you did in your life helped you and what things harmed you. If you went on a holiday, or you read a book, or you did a course or something, and it made you better, your total score graph immediately showed that that was a good thing. Do some more of it. But if you did something that was harmful, started a new job that was very difficult and you didn't like, or had a long weekend on the booze, and your total score graph got worse, you immediately knew that that activity was something that was harmful for you. So the total score graph gave immediate feedback at a glance that told you about the success or otherwise of your treatment, and the help or harm of the things you did or that happened to you. So the app was very helpful, and yeah, so videos, the fastest, easiest, best way to learn to understand your problems and how to get better and what probably caused them. The websites told you about all different aspects, and the short website Smile Fix It particularly helped people to find what they wanted. And then live streaming was very helpful, and I did live streaming 4 times a week. A lot of people watched the live streaming, usually 1,000 to 3,000 people for each 1.25 hour session, but once 8,800 people, once 8,700 people, once 4,800 people. So live streaming was very valuable. But I did it at 7 o'clock, which was most convenient for Perth people, 7 p.m. Perth time, which is 9 p.m. Sydney and Melbourne time, which is suitable for them. But we found that as many as 20% of the viewers were Americans or Canadians, and as many as 10% were from the United Kingdom. And 7 p.m. Perth time is 7 a.m. New York time, and 4 a.m. Los Angeles time. That's not convenient. So now I do the Sunday session on Sunday morning, which is Saturday evening in the Northern Hemisphere, which I hope is more convenient. And powder medicine worked far quicker. When I ground up the medicines in a coffee grinder and people dropped it on their tongue and sucked it and didn't swallow it, it started to work in 5 minutes. Your tongue is pink or red because the blood vessels in your tongue are so close to the surface, and when you drop powder on your tongue, it gets into those blood vessels in 5 minutes. Starts to work in 5 minutes. It's up in your blood flow to your brain. And then handling powder was a bit awkward, so I made pocket powder medicine dispensers, and we put the powder medicine in these dispensers and you carry it in your pocket. And when you start to feel anxious, or if you can't go to sleep, or you start to get post-traumatic stress disorder or whatever, and you've got the right medicine for that problem in your pocket dispenser, and you just whiz it out of your pocket and drop it on your tongue. And that soon starts to work even quicker, because the powder has a very nice taste, and your body starts to connect the very nice taste with getting better 5 minutes later, and that gradually causes taste conditioning. You've probably heard of Pavlov's dog and his dog conditioning. His dogs used to salivate when he gave them meat, and after they've got used to him giving them meat, they would start to salivate as soon as they heard his footsteps in the hall coming to give them meat, even before they got the meat. And it's like that with powder. If it tastes good, you get taste conditioning. So as soon as you taste the powder, your body starts to get better. It's a placebo effect, but it's a real effect. You really do start to get better even before the medicine's absorbed. So that's far better for mental health distress and for craving for addictive street drugs. If you can whiz the dispenser out, drop it on your tongue in seconds, and start to get relief in seconds, that helps you. It greatly reduces the severity of mental health distresses, and it greatly reduces the craving for addictive substances. And it is even better than that, because you can easily mix 2, 3 or 4 powder medicines together. So I mix 2, 3, 4 powder medicines together for different conditions. There's about 6 of them. There's a calm fast, up fast, a couple of depressant combinations, anger fix, tobacco fix, and they contain 2, 3 or 4 powder medicines which together reduce the mental health problem that caused the addiction, reduce the craving for the drug that caused addiction, and usually help with a second or third mental health disorder as well. So powder medicines in pocket dispensers, much faster and then much more helpful, and even more helpful because with powder you can get your exactly correct dose. People vary widely in what is the best dose for them, and if you take a dose which is not enough, it doesn't work very well, and if you take a dose which is too much, you get side effects. If you take exactly the right dose, you get the best result and the least side effects. And with the powders, the first powder dispenser we give people has got very low strength, so they take 3, 4, 5 or 6 doses and experiment until they find which number of doses, of small doses, gives them a total amount that is best for them, gives them the best result and the least side effects. And then we give them a dispenser that's got that correct amount for them in one dose. And the 7th tool is a heartbeat meditation aid. Meditation is so important for people with mental health disorders and addictions. What is meditation? Meditation is a little holiday from all your problems. What you do is you focus on something, and while you're focusing on that, you can pay less attention to your problems. But it's a habit you have to develop. You have to meditate again and again and again for weeks or months until you've got a strong habit, because to begin with, you focus on something and you forget your problems, your stresses and strains for only a few moments, and then you go back to them, and then you have to refocus, but your mind soon wanders back to your problems, and then you have to refocus. And what people who teach meditation usually teach you to do is either to focus on a word or to focus on your breathing. And focusing on a word is not very a strong mind grabber. You repeat the word, repeat the word, mumbo, 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 but soon your mind wanders back to your problems, so you have to refocus, mumbo, 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 and gradually over a period of weeks or months you are able to focus and concentrate on that word and completely forget everything else for 10, 20 or 30 minutes. Or they teach you to focus on your breathing. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. But your breathing is not a very mind-grabbing focus either. So you start to focus on the breathing, but you quickly go back to your problems, and then you refocus on breathe in, breathe out, but quickly go back to your problems. So the people who are the most troubled, the most anxious, people who can't sleep, people who've got post-traumatic stress disorder or post-traumatic evil focus, or whatever they've got, have great difficulty learning to meditate, and a lot of them don't learn to meditate. But I thought, well, listening to your heart beating is a much stronger focus. So I got a stethoscope and cut it short like that. That's the hearing part, and you just put it under your clothes on the upper part of your left chest, right over your heart, and you listen to your heart beating, and your heartbeat is loud and clear and strong and interesting, and it's much easier to focus on that and to stop focusing on your problems. And if you do that for a couple of months, you get very good at it, and then because there's some epigenetic changes that happen in your brain also that help you with meditation, and once the established is well helped with the heartbeat meditation aid, you can then meditate focusing on the word or focusing on your breathing, and focusing on your breathing is the best thing to do, the best thing to focus on. So meditation is a very important tool. I've got a couple more tools coming. These are bigger pocket dispensers, and they dispense fruit powders, as well as the growing problem of mental health and addiction. There's a massive worldwide problem of increasing diabetes, obesity, and blocked arteries that cause heart attacks and strokes and so on. And that's because over the last 100 or so years we do less and less hard physical work, and more of us are now living just sitting at a desk, and we don't walk very much. We've got cars, we've got public transport. They didn't used to have cars and public transport. So my grandfathers, one was a blacksmith and one was a farmer. They both did 60 hours a week, hard physical work and a lot of walking. My blacksmith grandfather never had a motor vehicle. My farming grandfather in 1915, at the age of 40, got a second-hand T model Ford which cost him £100, so he did less walking after that. But they needed 3,000 or 4,000 calories a day of energy to do all their work. But I and nearly all my children and grandchildren sit at a desk, and we only need 1,000 or 1,500 calories a day. So and at the same time there's been more and more calories in our diet, because sugar became a gold mine for food and drink manufacturers. 300 or 400 years ago, sugar was rare. It was a luxury, and only rich people could afford it, but people loved it so much that they gradually learned to mass produce it, and they crushed sugar cane and they crushed sugar beet, and sugar became more and more plentiful and cheaper, and that was wonderful because it stopped millions of people in the world from starving to death. 300 or 400 throughout mankind history, millions of people starved to death when there was a drought or a famine and they couldn't get enough to eat. Can you imagine how miserable that was? Mum and dad and the kids all slowly getting weaker and weaker and starving to death and dying one after the other. So sugar stopped all that, which was wonderful. But now, because sugar is very cheap, go into the supermarket, see how big a bag of sugar you can buy for very little money. It's plentiful, it's cheap, people love its taste, and it's addictive. Do a ChatGPT search on the addictiveness of sugar, and you'll find it's very addictive. Some people think it's as addictive as cocaine. So, and it's also easy to work with, easy to transport, and easy to store. So, gradually over the years, the food and drink manufacturers put as much sugar as possible in everything. All our drinks have got a lot of sugar in them, and foods have got a lot of sugar in them, and people love chocolate and lollies and confectionery and cakes and biscuits and some breakfast cereals have as much as 45 or 50% sugar in them. So we're getting far more calories and we're burning far less. So a lot of the sugar creates very high blood sugar levels, which causes diabetes, and we pee the sugar out in our urine, which is a problem. And a lot of the sugar gets turned into fat, so we get obese, and the fat and the sugar also harden and block the arteries that our blood flows in, and that causes failure in many parts of our body, especially heart attacks and strokes, but also weaker vision because the blood vessels in the back of your eyes are narrowed and not enough blood flows. And some dementia is due to narrowing of the arteries in the brain and not enough oxygen getting to the brain cells. And toes get cold and then turn black and need to be amputated because there's not enough blood getting to the toes. So too many calories. How are we going to fix that? Well, I thought just change the things that people put in their mouth. And the best things they could put in their mouth were lovely fruit powders, which are becoming more and more popular worldwide. More and more fruit powders being used to make sweets and to make thick shakes and drinks. And people love it, and it's becoming available, it's becoming cheaper. So I got 5,000 of these bigger pocket dispensers being made, which will give a 1 ml or 1 1/4 ml taste of fruit powder. With medicine dispensers, they only give a 0.2 of a ml dose of powder, which is not enough to get a good taste, so we had to have bigger dispensers which give one. So that will be the 8th tool, which hopefully will be available in March. That this trial model had some problems, leakage and stickiness, which we're overcoming. And got another tool coming, which I'm at present calling Phone Treasure, which will have lovely things on your phone that help you that you can quickly watch, that'll take your mind off a mental distress or a drug craving. So I think that's enough for one day, so I'll stop now and be back again on Wednesday evening at 7 p.m. Perth time, 9 p.m. Sydney and Melbourne time, and rather unhelpful times in the Northern Hemisphere. And please send me your comments and your questions and your criticisms. I'm too old to know how I can talk to people directly. The technology is beyond me, but after each session I go through all the new followers, all the likes and all the comments. Sometimes there's 90 comments, sometimes there's 190 comments. Some I can't reply to because people are not followers, and I can't reply to people who are not followers, but I am very interested in your comments and your questions and your criticisms, and I reply to as many of them as I possibly can.